Chess, nonsense, and analysis. Hi, dear viewer. We're talking tactics. Let's jump into it. So the game we're going to look at is between Mestrovic against Michael Tal. It was in 1966, and it's a Sicilian, classical Sicilian, and this is the so-called Sozin variation. Fischer loved playing this system. Bishop e3, we move on to the so-called Velimirovic variation. Dražan Velimirovic from Serbia, from Yugoslavia, used to love this position. Well, of course, this is the starting position. Both sides castle on different sides of the board, and they are going to go for it. Now, Michael Tal, his secret weapon were patterns, the ability to spot patterns in the board and take advantage of them. So let's go on. Tal plays a6. This is a completely normal move in this position. And a normal move here would be something like bishop back to b3. Let's say, white would put the bishop back. On b3, maybe black would play queen c7, and white would play rook h to g1 in preparation of g4, and very, very complicated, very, very fantastic variation really for both sides. And that's how it would go. But in this position, Mestrovic played f4. Well, it does seem to be a little bit too slow, but and Tal decides to hit in the center immediately with d5. So yeah, this is first our starting point. Which variations would Tal have been looking at before playing d5? So the first thing that Tal would have noticed after pawn to f4 is that the pawn is not able to move to f3, right? What does that mean? Then if we look at this diagonal, we're looking at patterns. So the queen on e2, let me highlight it. The queen on e2 and the rook on d1 are both on this h5 to d1 diagonal, which means what? Which means that you know if the bishop would land on that diagonal defended, then of course the bishop would be able to win the exchange, right? So d5, this makes it easier to attack, to calculate d5, because at the moment, okay, there are three pieces, the knight, the pawn, the bishop, but black also has three, knight, pawn on e6 and queen on d8. So yeah, at the moment it's balanced, but we have to also remember that black, excuse me, is going into the pattern of the rook because the queen is on the same line as the rook. But Tal knows for a fact, as soon as the pawn captures on d5 and he captures back, right, then the bishop is free to move. For example, in the game, the opponent played knight b3. Let's just illustrate this. If e captures d5, e captures d5, then look at how active this bishop all of a sudden is, right? If the knight goes somewhere else, bam, the bishop lands on g4. So the knight would most probably go to b3, and now bishop b6. And we are seeing that this is like very good development for black. Black may play moves like knight after if bishop b3, knight a5, rook c8, and just we're talking about these moves, putting the knight on a5 to open up the c file. The rook will go to c8, and there is play down the c file. It looks very promising for black, and white hasn't even started attacking on the king side. It's not surprising then that the opponent did not take, but plays the move knight to b3. So right, first things first, the pawn on d5 is hanging because white has got let's count 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that are taking d5. How many pieces does black have? Black has got 1, 2, 3 pieces only. So black is outgunned when it comes to d5, and black has to defend d5 in a manner that will also allow him to get counterplay. So Tal chooses knight b4 in this manner. There was also a possibility to play queen c7, but queen c7 would definitely be a sacrifice. But for initiative, but it's not clear what happens because pawn takes pawn and knight takes pawn. Let's say this position, what would black's uh, uh, pattern be, right? So I would say, well, maybe black would be hoping to get something here with the king on c1 and pawn on c2, but it's not knight before. It's not really what's the word I'm looking for? It's not not that convincing if you think about it. Um, but it's also possible. It was possible to play like this as well, right? But I think the line that Tal chooses is stronger. Instead of playing Queen C7, he plays directly knight b4. This obviously opens up the options. You know, sometimes in games, the more options you have, the better. There's more options for the queen to move to other squares. The opponent takes on d5 and pawn takes d5, of course, opening up for the bishop. What other pattern did you see? Maybe you can stop the video here and try to figure out what pattern against white. And please do remember here, the viewer, when you're looking for a pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are able to use that pattern there and then, just to see it. And sometimes you can then do something about it. But after this, e captures d5, e captures d5. Maybe stop the video here and look for the pattern. Did you find it? Yeah, excellent. Well, the pattern is staring us in the face, isn't it? The queen on e2 and the bishop on e3 are on the same line. So that is a pattern. So the opponent plays h3. Of course, let's not forget that there was that pattern. The threat was bishop g4 of queen e2 and rook d1, right? So plays h3. You see now how Tal is using patterns all over the board to slowly develop his position and get to a position where he's going to be able to then attack the white king. So he plays rook e8, a fantastic move. He's looking at that pattern on the e file. But you see, when you look at games by top players, when they do a specific, when they play a specific idea, it's not just that idea. There are other things in the position. It means that move is good on its own without that idea. So rook e8 brings the rook into the game. He fights for control of the open file. And but just by the way, there just so happens to be this pattern that he can use. That is the way to do it, right? So the opponent plays queen to f2. Gets out of the pattern. And now Tal plays bishop to f5. This is a free move because bishop f5 we attack the pawn on c2 and we vacate the square c8 for the rook. All right, so the opponent plays knight to d4. Knight e4 makes sense. We're going forward. We're going forward all the time with tempo. Knight captures e4, bishop captures e4. There was an idea for black to play, say, let's say queen f3. Very risky. But yeah, how do you respond here? Maybe you can pause the video. Right. So, well, I hope you found very complicated position. But first we would take on c3. It's logical. We take on c3 here, and if white captures back, we can play bishop e4. So when we take on c3, we expect white to do what? Let me do it with arrows so that I don't lose you, dear viewer. We take on c3, and then white captures our bishop on f5. And in that position, the position full of patterns, explosive position, possibly because the pattern you have that is against you is the pin on the d file, right? So possibly then you could play as like, let's say queen c8 in that position, where you're getting out of the pattern, that's you are taking the bishop, you are taking the knight, and you know you're able to play. Let's put that in. Okay, or knight takes d1 first. Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, and then queen c8. So this type of position where you are getting out of the pattern, playing queen c8, attacking the knight, and we are looking very good in terms of a possible attack against white. Okay, white is not lost, but black is definitely better in this position. All right, so Mestrovic took on e4. Tal plays bishop takes e4, and Mestrovic plays bishop to b3. So we are having this position, and yeah, Tal plays rook c8, logical. Yeah, attacking c2, and Mestrovic plays king b1, getting out of the pattern. Although he still is in another pattern, which is the bishop pattern here. All right, so I just happened to look at this position, and such positions are very difficult to look at without really asking the engine, what the engine thinks. And sometimes we forget that the players had to play without the engine anyway in 1966, without the help, not directly, but I mean, even having analyzed with the engine in some games, they never had that opportunity. Mm, so anyway, uh, look, I searched because Tal's next move didn't make me happy. And we will get to the move. Well, Tal played Queen B6 here. Okay, Bishop F6 first, excuse me. And after Rook D2, right here, Tal played Queen B6, which we will discuss Queen B6. But I feel that Queen B6, there is no pattern. But what Tal was playing for, he was playing for tactical tricks, right? We will get to that. But I feel that maybe a more logical way, which is supported by the computer, is to use okay, we've got one pattern, which is not one, but I mean, we've got a couple, right? But let's say we work with this pattern. The rook on e8 attacks the bishop on e3 via x-ray. Of course, we've got this pattern of the pawn on c2 being pinned, and there's lots of pressure on the pawn. But bishop h4 then is an interesting move. It's intriguing because what Black is trying to do, Black is trying to get to use the pattern against the bishop, right? Attacking e3. So, you cannot play something like Queen f1, for example, because I will take on c2 check, and then the bishop on e3 is hanging. And if Queen g1, then maybe Queen e7, and more pressure on that pattern, just to play with the pattern. And we're getting, there is a back rank as well, for white. And when we play Queen e7, we're getting our pieces ready. And yeah, the computer already says white is definitely, excuse me, black. Black is slightly better, but okay, a big fight still ahead. Anyway, Tal really, his secret weapon were patterns. He plays Queen b6. It's a fascinating move because more than anything, is really drawing the opponent into that tactical forest that Tal was famous for. Well, look, if the opponent does nothing, we can see there is a pattern though, but not immediately. But there's a possibility of a pattern being there, which is the bishop on f6, right? And the queen on b6, attacking on b2. Yes, indeed, I agree. But we can tell that it's very difficult to make this pattern work immediately. Okay, the opponent played rook c1 in this position. But let's say, what if the opponent played knight f5 as an example? Like, what would Tal have had in store? Maybe you can pause the video and then you can try to see what would you play here as black after knight f5. Are we back? Yeah, very interesting position. So there are a number of patterns, but the one that is the juiciest of them all is the one on this diagonal. It involves the king and also the bishop on f6 attacks b2. The queen could be involved, but we want more pieces involved. So a very huge candidate is rook captures c2, a very strong move. Now rook captures c2. The point is that if bishop captures b6, the queen, maybe you can pause again. I'm letting you pause a lot, okay? But no easy way to improve. So pause again, and how to continue as black. You find it? Yeah, excellent. It is a very beautiful mate here. It's double checks, because the bishop and the rook there is a possibility of a discover check, and bishop on f6 attacks b2, so rook captures b2, double check. And either if king C1, rook B1, checkmate, but also king A1, rook B1 is also checkmate. So the queen you cannot capture the queen. And if you take the rook, then queen A5, a beautiful move, because now notice that we are taking A2. And it's not just about A2 because the bishop is there, we'll be attacking B2 as well. And it's a very difficult position for white. For example, if white plays A3, I mean, here, black can play knight takes C2, rook takes C2, and say bishop takes F5, and everything is still there. All the patterns are there. Black will capture the exchange whenever they need, but they are a pawn up and still with a beautiful attack. So we can understand Tal setting up all these patterns, right? So the opponent plays rook c1 to overprotect c2, and Tal played rook c4. So we may actually say that possibly Tal saw this rook c1, rook c4, and it looks so beautiful because all the pieces, black pieces, are completely centralized. It's amazing. Yeah, but of course the computer spoils our fun here, and the computer just simply says here white should have played g4, and the computer says there's nothing for black. Actually, black is going to be worse. And when you start to now look at it, yes, black's pieces are well placed, but so are white's pieces defensively. And white is threatening g5. I mean, if you play g6, g5, and f5, and bishop e5, otherwise your bishop is going to be blocked in by f6. No. Bishop e5 takes, and knight f5, and threatening knight h6 check, and already white is going to be able to be better. Yeah, of course, this is not a forced variation. It's just it illustrates though the possibilities that white has, and it illustrates that Tal's concept, although very tricky and so on, it's not completely correct, should we put it that way, right? Or rather, it wasn't the most accurate continuation. So the opponent plays a3, which then tells us, look, maybe time trouble in this and pressure, but this is a bad move because now you're making queen b6 make sense. Yeah, Mestrovic makes queen b6 make sense because the bishop on b3 is now not is only protected by the knight. Remember, there is a pin on the pawn on c2, so b3 is hanging anyway. So when Tal plays knight c6, the bishop is hanging. And the problem with this diagonal is that we've got the queen there eyeing things. It takes, and now Tal plays queen takes b3. The pawn on c2 is pinned, so the patterns finally do it, and then he plays a queen b6, working with the bishop. B2 is attacked. G4 plays G6. King A2, queen C7 by Tal. And yeah, he's just bringing more and more pieces into the attacking fray. F5, bishop E5. Look at that, how centralized the pieces are. It's quite nice, right? Takes on G6, takes back, plays H4, and Tal plays B5. And here we can see that Tal is faster because of a pattern towards the rook on c1. So b4, you must take with the a pawn, and then a5. And now we can see that it's easy to, then the opponent resigned. Maybe here you can figure out, stop the video and figure out how you would continue, how would you win if white were to take on c4 with the pawn, for example. Have you done that? Okay, let's just quickly have a look. So takes play always the most forcing move. The most forcing move is the one that involves checks. So I say queen a4 check makes sense. The king must go to b2. The king is pinned, so we take on b4 check. What will he do? I don't know. King a2? I have no idea. Yeah, well, king a2 is probably not that strong, right? Because we'll be able to involve our rook, isn't it? Like so. No? And even if you do block, I would take, and your pawn your bishop then would be in danger. So possibly you'd have to play king a1, but we can hardly imagine that it's possible for the opponent to defend it. There are so many ways to do it. For example, you can play directly queen a3 check and then take on c3, because the bishop will hang in the end, right? Rook takes, queen takes, and then take on e3. Or I guess, could we take directly on c3 check? Maybe. Rook captures c3, queen takes c3 check, rook b2, and now rook b8 should finish them off. Yeah, it's just too much. It's too much firepower in the position, and yeah, it's clear that white is lost. So that was a very nice illustration of Tal using the patterns to continue with an attack. So we're looking at these, we're still about calculation, how to calculate, but now we're looking at other factors during a game. Yeah, very interesting. Right. So do like, share, subscribe, and please give more variations if you did see interesting variations in the game. Yeah. So till next time, for now, I will say checkmate.